In this video I want to take you very quickly through neuroscience, the uncertainty of reward and how that helps learning. Well, the first thing you need to know is that it releases dopamine, and dopamine makes the brain highly receptive to learning. How do you do this? Well, I was introduced to this, as many of you probably were, by Jeff Carr, and began to use it in my teaching. If you want to know more about the science, then you need to visit this man, Dr. Paul Howard-Jones, who's at the University of Bristol. He's written a number of papers which are really accessible, and there are YouTube videos. His research lays down certain conditions, and one is that the element of 50-50 reward, or even worse odds than that, release dopamine in significant amounts. And so I mimic this in class simply with the toss of a coin, and I'll tell you why I do that later. And the next thing he points out that this is a gaming situation, so where there's no game involved, a question answered, this is how the body responds with some slight reaction. But when dice are rolled, so when there's a random element, or the 50-50 chance, the responses are much greater. In other words, students learn much more simply by having a game-based, reward-based system that is random. It's not based on how good you are, but purely on chance. And then the other thing he points out, that people actually respond better when they can rejoice in the misfortune of others, and that's going to be playing a part in the type of game that gets set up. The next bit of really good news, for us anyway, is the effect that it has on boys. And so when people start choosing uncertain rewards and gambling, the rewards are much higher, as we can see above the line here. And more boys choose this option. More girls choose this option as well, but it's even more pronounced in boys, and therefore will lead to greater learning with boys. So Bristol University have actually turned this into a website called Zondel, and here's an example of a kind of game that you can play. So you'd load up PowerPoint, for example here on the Tudors, and your students would study it in real time as you would teach it normally. Then you would ask them multiple choice questions, and they would each have a way of signalling to you their answer, and they do it through these shapes here. That would be their team responses, so you'd know to record them on screen. Then you can reveal them one by one to see which is right and which is wrong, and students before that can decide to indicate up here whether they wish to gamble their points. And gambling would double their points, but if they lose they get no points at all, even if they got the answer right. And this is supposed to increase the dopamine production by giving them 50-50 chance of reward. It's a really cool website, but I found it quite slow to use in the classroom because I don't have my own classroom. You might have much more success setting up your own room in advance and proceeding through the games this way. I've adapted this and taken a much easier DIY approach, where I simply take a coin and toss it once each group has responded, and if it lands heads up or tails, depending on what they've called, they double their points, and if it doesn't, then they get 0 points, or sometimes if I'm feeling cruel they'll take a certain number of points away. Because I want to speed things up, I've set up an Excel spreadsheet that will help me add up all the scores as I go. Right, here I am in Excel, and I want to create a total here that's going to be added automatically. Here I've got my columns, and I'm going to put some scores in which will be added up. So how will I put in a formula? It's really easy. So here I'm just going to enter my equals, and then every cell I'm going to put in brackets. So I want to start with this cell here, and then I'm going to close the brackets, and I'm going to plus it to the new cell, so I open brackets again, click on the new cell that I want to go in there, close those brackets, plus,
open some new brackets, get my new cell, and then close that off and open, add it to, whoops, I want to open the brackets, again I'm getting overexcited, add the cell in, close the brackets, add, and I've done it again, because I really am so excited. Don't forget to open the brackets, get my new cell, close the brackets, and then finally, plus, open the brackets, my final cell, close the
brackets, and that's going to give me a total. Now at the minute, the total is 0, but as soon as I start adding numbers in, you'll see that they start to total up. And that is going to be a really simple way to play this game. And obviously, once you put the scores in, students can gamble, and if they choose, for example, to double that score and they win, you simply change it to 14 and the total will change. Very, very simple to do.